disclose or don't disclose, this is a very important decision that you will make, and it can also be potentially very stressful. But as long as you've got the facts, I'm hoping that this section will actually help you to make those decisions. So what we'll be going through is must you disclose, fears around disclosure, why should autistic job seekers disclose, when to disclose, how to disclose, and we're going to have a little bit of an activity about explaining your autism, and then we're going to have a discussion at the end about the benefits and risks of disclosure. Next slide, please.
Yep.
Okay, so must you disclose? So from the perspective of employee rights and responsibility, there is no legal obligation for people with a disability to disclose information unless it is likely to affect your performance or ability to meet the inherent requirements of the job. This also includes working safely and ensuring the safety of your co-workers as well. Next slide. Disclosure fears. Now, I hear a lot of reasons why people don't want to disclose, and as you can see from the slide here, these are just some of the statements and some of the fears that people have said this is the reason why they don't disclose. So the fear that the employer may focus on the disability and not their actual abilities. There's perceived or real lack of understanding in the workplace about autism, and as we've gone through each session, that's one of the themes I think that has run through our presentation today, is about you know, those myths that people have about autism. And this is why we're being very proactive in getting out there and doing this autism awareness training. So this is kind of alleviating that and making employers more aware around autism. Experience of being discriminated against in the past positions of employment, and I know with some of the programs that I've been involved with, and especially working with the more mature candidates that we've had coming through our programs, that has been one of the major issues of why they would not ever disclose to a potential employer in the future, but going through our programs they don't have to do that now. So, and also I think the other major one is the fear that they may be treated differently by colleagues, even patronized or given unfair advantages in the job. So there's just a few. This is an opportunity if anybody would like to share any of their experiences that they've had in the past, or fears that they may have for the future.
One of the fears too, especially for people who have recently been diagnosed, is they don't have that confidence yet to explain it, disclose it. So if you're not ready yet, by all means, no one says that you have to disclose your autism. And it might just be a matter of time for you to come to terms with it, understand it, and understand what's the best way that you can convey that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, next slide, please. Right, should you disclose? So the National Autistic Society recommend that you tell your employer, and there's three main reasons around this. So the first reason is the equality legislation. Now this gives employers a duty to give reasonable adjustments to the recruitment process in the workplace. And as we said previously in the previous section, nowadays employers are still using the traditional interviewing and recruitment processes, which is a disadvantage to people with autism. So it is about if you do disclose this, then they have that duty to actually make those reasonable adjustments, and that's right from your application to the interview process, and also if you're successful moving into that employment as well. So if reasonable adjustments are put in place, you're likely to be more successful at work and will probably find work less stressful. And again, coming through our programs, our retention rates are 96%. So you know, having this disclosure and going through our programs is very beneficial. And number 3, if colleagues know about your autism, they are likely to be more understanding, which will help you to build better relationships. Now, I know that this can be one of the fears about, okay, I don't want the whole of my team to know. And when you come through our programs, this is one of the questions that we ask, you know, who is it that you would like to know within your team? So of course, because the managers are involved in our programs, they're aware, and also allocated buddies, but there might also be other people. Some people are okay with the rest of the team knowing. Some candidates will prefer just for a manager to know, and then when they're ready and they've built those workplace relationships and they feel confident with those relationships, then they would like that to have that opportunity to actually, you know, have those conversations with their work colleagues. Next slide, Michelle, please.
Okay.
So when to disclose? So generally, a good time to disclose might be when you need to ask for reasonable accommodations. And like I've just said previously, that can be right from, you know, attending a face-to-face interview. But it can also be if you're already in a role and you haven't disclosed that, and there's something in the workplace that is preventing you from competing for a job or performing a job well, then that would be a good time to disclose. But please remember that you can disclose at any time to your employer. There isn't a time frame for this. And like I said, sometimes it might be just about feeling comfortable within that new work environment. Next slide, please.
Sure thing.
So how to disclose? So if you're applying for roles that do not have a disability recruitment pathway, Michelle spoke about that earlier on, then you may need to educate the potential employers and interviewers on how autism shapes you. So that is around those exercises that Kate went through as well, because that's going to enable you to have the confidence to explain who you are and what your strengths are. So the things you need to consider is, what should the employer or interviewer, what do they need to know? So again, it's coming back to, you know, what are your strengths? Looking at the difficulties you may have, but also identifying the strategies that work for you as well, that can be transitioned into that workspace. But another way as well is a disclosure statement. So I'm just going to read this and then I'm going to ask you 2 questions. So I have autism, which affects the way I communicate and interact with others. The main effect this has on me is that I have difficulty with understanding some non-verbal body language and making eye contact. In the interview, I may not look at the interviewer in the eye as much as I should, but this does not mean that I am not focused on what they are saying. I can also find it hard to judge how much information to give. It would be helpful if the interviewer could ask clear questions and let me know when I have said enough. My autism also brings many strengths. My attention to detail makes me very efficient and accurate in my work. I am also very passionate and hardworking. I have attached some fact sheets about autism for your information. So firstly, if I was an employer, how do you think that the employer would receive this information? In a positive light or a negative light?
Positive.
if I was an employer, if you'd written that to an employer, how do you think that the potential employer would look at this disclosure statement? Do you think it's a positive statement or a negative statement?
And you might be unclear yourself. You might be wondering the same thing right now, going, not sure I would send that, or, oh,
Debatable.
Beck, you would think negative. Why is that, Beck?
Sorry, I was sorting out my mic. I think if I was an employer, I would potentially interpret this as negative because you're starting out with, these are the things I struggle with, rather than starting out with like, these are the things that I'm good at, I guess. So I guess, you know, when you're going through like, I don't know, I'm not sure if someone would read it super in depth and maybe they'd get stuck on the struggles and maybe be like, oh, it's too hard, and put it in the too hard basket maybe.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can
It's positive because you're acknowledging what your skills and how your skills can add value. And in saying that, it says here it would be help. So your last paragraph, my autism brings many strengths. So you're ending it in a good light. So arguably, I see it as a positive because you've identified the problem, which can seem to be negative, but then overall, I think it's a positive, letter.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm kind of looking at it from the scope of unconscious bias.
Yeah.
I think is something that's strongly impacting my opinion on that. I think if I personally read that, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. But I think the average employer who maybe wasn't educated,
But
I guess.
it also comes down to the interpretation of language. We have to remember that because language. Today I was like, posting something about like how like the use of language communicates variety of colors. So that proves the point that not everyone is gonna look at it with the same lenses.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't forget, because this is a disclosure statement, they are then coming under that legislation that they can't be discriminated against because of that. And also, this is also advising or requesting these accommodations at the interview about how to ask the questions, how the questions need to be worded. So,
and Beck, it also sort of tackles that unconscious bias. So if imagine that there's 4 panel members and an autistic candidate struggles with eye contact. Imagine about the unconscious bias of those 4. They might be going, oh my gosh, this guy's not even interested in the role, or so they might be already formulating that unconscious bias. So hopefully a sample disclosure statement like this can preempt that and go, do not read into the fact that I'm not making eye contact with you.
Yeah.
It's not bearing at all on my concentration, my interest, etc. So could be, but I'm with you though, Beck. Someone else might look at that and go, oh my God, that's too hard.
I think it's very, like, I don't think it's either. I think it's very, I think it could swing either way, honestly, because that exact reason.
Yeah, and it also depends, like you said earlier as well, around the employer having that awareness, and also if it is a recruitment drive under the disability recruitment process, because they've all got their, their quota of employing people with disabilities. And also as well, when you're doing independent job searches now, especially a lot of them are online now, they do have that box where they say, do you have a disability? And a lot of people, again, this is where this question comes into, do I disclose or don't I disclose? Okay, so next slide, please. Thank you. That was a good discussion. Okay, so explaining your autism, right? Is there a slide missing?
Oh, there's a picture. I think some of the images aren't loading. Apologize. My apologies.
Okay, so before we go into this, can I ask a question? If anybody is willing, to have just to advise us if they've actually been in a situation where they've explained their autism to a potential employer, or even to, in a social context as well, because I know that sometimes that can be very hard to let potential friends know that you're actually on the autism as well. I've had that personally.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, I have as well. Yeah.
Okay, would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
So I disclosed actually in a university situation to a lecturer who then proceeded to ignore me completely. It's as though he had
the same thing.
It's as though he had
Exactly the
no
same
way of
thing.
processing it. Thankfully, our university's got a really good disability support unit, and they've been helping me through. But even so, it's such a yucky experience.
Absolutely. I was, so I disclosed to a lecturer second semester last year, and I ended up needing some reasonable adjustments, which was just, I think it was a 3-week extension on a written assignment because I'd gotten sick. And he didn't get back to me for 6 months with my results, whereas he got back to everybody else within about, 2 or 3 weeks of them submitting the assignment. And I wrote to him and the head of my degree being like, I'm autistic, I had these adjustments, can you let me know what's happening with this assignment being marked, because it was worth, I think, 50 or 60% of my grade. And they didn't get back to me for 6 months. They just completely ignored me because it was like they couldn't process that, I don't know, that I'd had these adjustments made. It just wasn't worth getting back to me with a mark. So I can definitely relate to that, Lizzie.
Yes, and it probably is, it's ignorance and fear on their part, because they're going, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know.
Exactly. They don't know how to deal with it.
There's
not really anything to deal with. Yeah. If I can't see it, it's not happening.
And my situation's left me in a bit of a spot though, because I've had to apply for TD grades, which is an extension of 12 months to get this block finished. I'm doing an MBA in block mode, which is insane. And so I've now got 12 months to finish off this work, but I've got no guidance, and I was excluded from group work. So how am I supposed to do the group assignment without a group? So it's all so messy, and I haven't yet completely resolved it, but I do have some support. But it's really yucky.
I would encourage you to continue with that support. That's not a very nice story, and I'm sorry to hear that you've both been through that. But coming through our programs, it is different, it is positive. And when we do our support plans, sorry?
My bad.
This is something that we will go through with you, and it is about explaining your autism, what your challenges are, but also what the strategies you have to support you in that, and how your managers can also be very supportive. Okay, next slide.
I was going to just share one more thing, Nat, and I promise I will shut up. But back to what Beck and Lizzie was saying, one of the candidates that we just placed in Canberra, she came through the program, and part of the program is you have to have autism to participate, so it is no secret. However, she had been recently diagnosed, and she hadn't even, and she's a mature age, so she's has had work experience and has had some different careers, but she hadn't yet come out to her and her family. Her family didn't know about her diagnosis, and she wasn't yet comfortable to share it. So coming into the program was confronting for her to, I guess, identify as being autistic and embrace it. But I just got a call from her. She starts on Monday, and I got a call from her going, are you going to come in and take photos? Because you took photos of the other candidates and you shared it on social media. And at the same time, I was thinking, wow, has she not grown with her acceptance and of her autism that she now wants it posted on social media? But hey, I'm starting my job today, but sorry, I digress. And here I shall go.
Examples are good, Michelle. Thanks. Okay, so what does research say? So Dr. Noah Sasson, 2017, found that participants' first impressions of autistic adults were less favorable than those of non-autistic adults. However, impressions of intellectually able autistic adults improved with diagnostic disclosure compared to having no label or being mislabeled as typical. So these findings suggest that diagnostic disclosure may improve first impressions. And I suppose, again, this is about what Kate was talking about earlier on, about doing your research. So even if you don't come through one of our programs and you're thinking about applying to an organization, you know, do your research, have a look at who you can make contact with. Even looking at, you know, making contact with the HR department as well, you know, and having those conversations. And that might be an opportunity for you to have those discussions about disclosure as well. So I would really say do your research, because when they are aware, this is when those accommodations can be put in place. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I was just typing in our emails in case. Oh, what picture now isn't uploading? Do you know? I can't remember.
Okay, so this is going to be looking at advantages and disadvantages. So the pros and cons. Okay, so I'm going to open this up, and please use your mics or please type in. But what I want to ask, the first question I'm going to ask is, what would be, what do you feel would be the disadvantages of disclosure?
Prejudice.
Sorry, what was that?
Absolutely.
Prejudice.
Oh, yeah. Prejudice, because maybe it's someone who hasn't ever been exposed to it, and the only connection that they have with autism might be some fictional character that they've seen on TV or
in a movie.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd be afraid also of being excluded.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that hurts.
Is that you, Lizzie?
Yes.
Yep.
So
I've got to know Lizzie's voice now.
Your example is you're perfect. And when people that don't have the education or the awareness about autism, their first response is, okay, I'll just disengage, back away, if they haven't had an opportunity to find out more. So
yeah, and that really hurts. And it's you know, because I've just experienced this recently, I can tell you it's left me with this sort of bruised feeling. I'm still trying to recover from it emotionally.
Yeah. Any other suggestions around the disadvantage? Okay, so I'll name a few. So like you've just said there, Lizzie, it can lead to the experience of exclusion. It can lead you to being treated differently than others. It can bring up conflicting feelings about your self-image. It can lead to you being viewed as needy, not self-sufficient, or unable to perform on par with your peers. But also disclosing the personal and sensitive information can sometimes be embarrassing, but very difficult to actually start those conversations as well. And another big one really is being concerned that you'd be given less responsibilities and also being passed over for promotion as well. Okay, so that's kind of like the negative aspects. Let's have a look at the advantages. So what do you think would be some of the advantages of disclosure?
You could get the adjustments, the reasonable adjustments that you need in order to thrive in your workplace.
Yep.
Well, by disclosing your autism, it actually gets people to understand better. Because I mean, not even disclosing it, people can still ostracize you. So whether you if people think that, like, you know, by not disclosing it, you'll be okay, not necessarily, because I've been in situations where I didn't say a word, and they, because the way I speak, the way I interacted with people, they saw in me that, yeah, this guy is weird. So, you know, so the point I'm trying to make is that even if you don't disclose, people will still would still exclude you from some things.
Yeah.
Good
I
point.
think also it's a really good way to just make connections with other people and just find that you might actually be surrounded by other autistic people who are just like you, but no one's actually talking about it. And I actually found this in my own really close friendship group. It turns out when I was like, oh, I'm autistic, about half of us are autistic. It turned out everyone came out and disclosed to each other. And I think, you know, in the workplace as well, that has happened to me a couple of times. Yeah, I think it can just be a really good way to connect with other people and sort of get on a new level with people.
Yeah.
And
So
on that same note too, when we run these programs and we solicit for buddies or mentors to work with autistic new hires, you would be surprised at the response that we get, because you know what? It's not 1 in 54 is not rare. There's, you know, someone has a son, a cousin. So those people are wanting to be engaged. Not everybody, of course. There's the others that have maybe no connection and are ignorant of autism. But you also, like you said, make those connections with people who know someone, or they have a child themselves, or and a lot of you just now got your diagnosis. A lot of people, particularly females. And in Australia, it's not easy as an adult to get a diagnosis. We all know that. So
absolutely. So when I've sort of come out to friends and colleagues and whatnot, it ends up just being this big note sharing session where we say, oh, go see this psychiatrist, they're great, and oh, I got this reasonable adjustment that actually really helped me, maybe you should try that.
Yes.
So it's a really good way to just share information that might not easily be accessible otherwise.
And Lizzie's making a good point that a diagnosis is very expensive when you're an adult.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of people out there who might self-diagnose and then don't have the confidence to ask or to connect with people because they're afraid that it's a self-diagnosis, therefore it will be ignored or will be treated as, oh, they're making it up, or
Absolutely.
It's not legitimate, is it? It's not legitimate if you make it up yourself. Except it is.
Exactly.
But the other thing as well about disclosing, it actually provides legal protection against discrimination. So once you've disclosed that, you're, you know, legally protected against discrimination. Do you know one of the biggest things though? It actually reduces stress, because if you don't disclose, it's kind of like keeping that secret. And how much energy do you use keeping those secrets? It can be very, very tiring. So, you know, that is another positive about that disclosure, is that you don't have to keep that to yourself.
I think especially...
sorry,
you go.
I was just saying, we've got Molly who's joining us. And Molly probably wasn't here for the previous sessions, but saying that she's experienced has had a negative experience with disclosing. And that resonates with a lot of people here today, Molly. Again, the best practice is to go through a pathway program where it's out in the open, the managers are on board, and that's not an issue. But Molly, your experiences have probably made you a bit protective of who you want to share that with in the future. I completely understand.
Yeah, and also going through our programs, on the flip side, we've had people, especially I had one gentleman that I was working with, and he'd only recently been diagnosed. It was about a year and a half prior to attending one of our programs. And one of the things that was very difficult for him was that throughout his lifetime, the amount of jobs that he lost, but then having that diagnosis and then coming through our program, he had a lot to deal with because he was having flashbacks to negative experiences and bringing that to the program. So we kind of like had to work with him and look at, you know, the program, what we were doing, the supports, and he works so hard around changing his thinking style and his behaviors, because he was having a lot of meltdowns as well, especially you know, when there were little triggers of things that were happening in the program. But he went on now, and he is a absolute first-class advocate for our programs, and he's actually, we've brought him in to speak to new candidates coming through our programs, and they just sit in awe when he tells his story and his journey of where he was to then, you know, having that disclosure, coming onto the programs, and the challenges that he faced, not only with the program but personally as well, and come out the other end and being offered a role, and then now being an advocate, you know, for our programs, you know, is absolutely, you know, this is one of the reasons why I love my job, is to see that, you know, that change and that, you know, confidence and self-image, and oh, it's just amazing. So,
actually, Matt, you remind me of something. Those of you in Canberra, we're hosting an event in October. It'll be advertised shortly, but it's looking at unemployment and the connection with anxiety and depression, how those two, for autistic community, there is a link, and they are connected. And we'll be having a games night at Jolt Games in Mitchell, where we'll have past participants in there, as well as new participants, autistic job seekers, looking for some advice. But it's really about, we'll be having board games, but it's really just to facilitate and share their experience and with mental health, but also with unemployment and how that impacted on their mental health, and alternative recruitment processes. So those of you in Canberra, look out. We'll be advertising that shortly. Come play some board games and just listen or have a chat. It's up to you. Sorry, not to promote my own event.
Yeah, it's okay. And it's just that, you know, when we kind of like do these type of events, or, you know, when we're in programs, and we, you know, have conversations around disclosure and, you know, people's experiences, you know, we do hear a lot of negative experiences, and it's really sad to see that still goes on today. But through our programs, we can, you know, our pathway is a positive experience. Okay. All right. Thank you for all your comments there and participation. I really appreciate it. Sometimes I know it can be very hard talking about your own personal experiences, so thank you. Okay, next slide, please.
Next slide. Ah, there we are.
Okay, so yeah, again, like I said, you know, follow us, like we've all been saying. We look forward to connecting with you. You know, we do have these career recruitment pathways. So there's all our sites. I know that Michelle has actually put our email addresses up there as well. So yeah, if you do have any questions or want to connect, just drop us a line.